In this lesson, we will learn how to store values in an Android app. So we will use SQLite to store values. So what I have open on my screen is a default Android app, and I'll just delete the hello world. And then we will just design our app. So I'll add a linear layout vertical. The standard thing we do, match parent is the height and width. And now I will add two edit text to it. So these would be two values that we will take, name and say course. And these two values we would, after we have taken an input from the user, we would store them in the Android app. So name and course are the two edit text to take those values that we have defined. And we will add, say, a button. And what the button is, that when we press the button, we would add the values to the, or save the values. So let's say the button text says save. So this is our design. So two edit text to take the inputs and the button to save the values. Now let's go to main activity.java. So the first thing we need to do here in this case is that we will create a new Java file. So we were in student DB and we will create a new Java class. And what is this Java class for? This Java class is for helping us in our database applications when we access the SQLite. So let's name this class DB helper, and this class will extend SQLite open helper. So this is the class it will and we will just create this class. So we have created this class, public class DB helper, and when I click right here I can see generate, and we will generate all the implement methods that this class needs to implement. So this class needs to implement an onCreate and it needs to implement an SQLite. Before we start doing it, let's make some definitions that we want. So let's say the table name we want to create is known as, say, students. So that's the table name we want to create, and this table students has two fields. So let's define them. Say string, the first field is, say, name. So the name of that field is name, and the second field it has is, say, course that the student is doing. So field course and its value is course. So these are the two fields of the database, of the table students. Then another thing that's required here is we need a constructor. So we'll just define a public DB helper, and we just need to understand this code from a perspective of just knowing it. And let's call it context. It needs a context, and the context is, let's call it context, and the other thing it needs is a name, and this name we will explain in a little while. And here we will just write super context comma name comma null comma 1. So this is what we would do in the constructor. So just note what we have done in the constructor right now. That's more than important for us. So in onCreate, what we will do is SQL database dot exec SQL. So it will execute this SQL, and what should we do? We should create our table. So create table, and what's the name of the table? The name of the table we defined here was students, so we will use that field plus table name, and plus what are the two fields in it? Name, which is of type text, and then we have course, which is again of type text. So these are the two columns of fields of our database. So we have defined our 2 columns. So on create, and we have created this database. On upgrade, we just leave it blank for now. We don't need to handle it. So this is how we would handle when our app gets upgrade. But because we're just not doing it right now, so we're not getting into upgrade. The other thing we need to do is we just need to define a method that we will use when we try and insert a value into the database. So let's define that method. So public, say boolean insert, and we would get the 2 fields from the input, which is string and quotes, which we need to insert into the database. So let's define these 2 fields, and now we will need to get our database and do it. So SQLite database db is equal to this dot get writable database. So because we are going to write to the database, so we have gotten a get writable database. Another thing we will use is something known as content values. So we will use content values to put values into the database. So content values is equal to new content values, and what we would do is we would put the values as name and value pairs. So content values dot put, and the key is field underscore name. This was the name of the field, and what is the value? We got the value name from the user, so we put it into it. Similarly, content values dot put, now we need to put the field underscore course, so that's the name of the key or the field name and or the column name, and what is the value against it? It is course which the user provided us, which we got as a parameter in this method. So course. Now that we have created our content values, we will just put it into the database. So how would we do it? We would say long result is equal to db dot insert, and in which table do we need to insert? The table name. So this is the table name we need to insert. We need to just give null here, and the values we not want to insert, which we had created in content values. So one by one we can insert values into the database like this. So we given the table name and we have given the values we are wanting to insert. Now result will give us the output of when the insert function is being called. Now if result is equal to -1, which means that the insert failed, what will we do? If result is equal to -1, return false, else return true. So what it will tell us is whether the insert was successful or not. So if it is true, means the insert was successful. If it is false, means the insert was not successful. So with this is what we need to do in our DB helper. So that is done. So with that, we will go back to our main activity, and let's try and complete the code in our main activity. So the first thing we will define in our main activity are the components we designed in the layout. So we had designed to edit text. So edit text, say let's call it text1 and text2. Then we had defined a button on the layout, so let's call it button b1. Let's also define the name of the database we are creating and we will be using here. So let's say define a field db.name, and let's give it the value edufect.db, and we need a variable for the DB helper we had created. So let's create it and say call it mydb. So we need these variables. First thing we will do in the code is initialize all our components, the standard thing we do. So text1 is equal to edit text, find view by id r.id.edit text. Text2 is equal to edit text, find view by id r.id.edit text2, and b1 is equal to button, find view by id r.id.button. So we have initialized all our three components. Similarly, let's initialize our database. So my db is equal to new db helper, and what are the parameters it needs? It needs this, and it needs the database we wanted to create, so db underscore name. So we have initialized our database. Now what we need to do is, just when the user clicks on the button, put the values from the take the values from the edit text and put it into the database. So we will do b1.set on click listener new view.on click listener, and what do we do here? Let's take the two values. So string, say name1 is equal to text1 dot get text dot to string, standard way. Similarly, string course1 is equal to text2 dot get text dot to string. So we have taken the two values and we now need to insert them into the database. So how will we do it? So let's say boolean bool is equal to my db. This was our database, and which method had we created there? Let's go and have a look. We had created this method insert to insert values, which took the name and course as parameters. So let us just create it, call it my db.insert, and what's the name? Name1 comma course1. And we just want to display if our database insert was successful or not. So let's just put a toast. So if bool, so if the result was true, so we will just make a toast dot make text main activity dot this, and what will we say here? Data inserted. Say if we were successfully able to insert it, and toast dot length short. This is what we want to do, and once we have created it, we just want to show it. So if the bool was successful, else what do we want to show? So we'll show another toast dot make text main activity dot this, comma, in this case we will say unsuccessful. Let's say the output we want to show is unsuccessful, and we display it again for a short period of time. So toast dot length short dot show. So depending upon whether we were able to successfully insert it into the database or not, we will show it. Now with this, our application has been fully designed. We took two parameters, two values from the user, name and course, and we have successfully inserted them into the database. Now we'll start running our code. So we started the build process. We know build will just take a little bit of time. So we will be patient as the build happens, and then the APK will get installed. So as usual, just be a little patient as the build happens. As we can see, the build is over and it's installing the APKs. So let's just wait for the APKs to get installed, and we're getting the emulator up, and we have our name and course displayed here. So let's put in some names. Let's say James is the name we want to insert, and the course we want to talk about is, say, Android. That's the value we want to save in the database, and we've gotten data inserted, so which means it was successfully inserted. Let's insert another value into the database. Let's call it, say, Amy, and let's call it as advanced, say, Java. These are the values we want to insert into the database. So that also came up as successfully inserted. So with this, we have been able to successfully insert values into the database. Okay.